Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Old. So, this is a Midnight Shyamalan movie, and I know a lot of people will say that, for Midnight Shyamalan, a lot of people, don't know, what they'll get with, his kind of films. Like, sometimes you'll get amazing films, like I would deem to be great films, like Unbreakable, or Split, or maybe even Glass. But then all of a sudden you'll also get other movies that are like this one where it's like, okay, I think there's something interesting about this, but like this movie is just there's not enough excitement even in this film, which there are moments when there are things going on in this film, but it's just a lot of just sitting or standing or whatever around through this movie because there's not much for these people to do, but eventually just count the minutes for them to eventually die. So really that's what this movie is basically about. A lot of people will make the comparisons to Fantasy Island, but there is no wish fulfillment thing going on here, besides the fact that everybody is going to go into a beautiful location up until a certain point where they all decide that they need to be put into a very specific kind of location to eventually pull off the gimmick of this movie. So going into this film, I thought that this film was just a film to eat up time. If you have nothing better to do, check Old out. Really, I just thought that this movie was just I was like, man, this is a long-winded film because once you figure out what the concept is, you're just kind of yeah, I'm just okay, so we're basically going to be watching paint dry in this movie. All right. It's a waste of time to watch a span of, eventually just waiting for someone to die. So really that's what this movie is. There were some parts and bits and pieces of it that I did like, but then again, it's the watching paint dry kind of film. So with that said, what else could I tell you about this movie? So there's a lot of people that get this winning sweepstakes of a thing to make it to this resort. Everyone is to come into this resort and have a specific drink of their liking being brought to them, and everything that these people could imagine, it seems like this is such the most beautiful place on earth. And so you start to have us kind of find out that there's kind of certain kind of people on this island or on this little resort of a thing. You're gonna see bizarrely that hey, this guy is a police officer, this guy is so-and-so, this girl is so, and I'm but why does that play into a factor of anything? It always feels like every person in this movie also has to say their resume when they're it's so weird. Hey, I'm a doctor and specialist of so-and-so thing, and so here is how I'm going to come in and help you. It's really? But yeah, so I thought there was some enjoyment of this film to barely be had. Really, I started to lose interest about 80 minutes or 90 minutes in. I was just okay, this movie can only probably go one way, and that's the way it went. And we have a whole end result at the tail end of this movie where you find out why these people have put this whole thing together. But yeah, other than that, like you just like it's the paint dry movie. It's the just watching it all just unfold slowly but surely. And supposedly you get like life happening, let's just say in a cryptic like sense, but like there isn't a understanding of how that life actually happens. So that's great. And plus also like yeah, I think that's all that I got. Like anything further into me talking about this movie is going to just basically give it all away. So really there were some characters that I did enjoy out of this, but also you just start to realize that like how long are you really going to have to invest in certain people like through this film, and that isn't very long. It's just like, yeah, I bet this person is just gonna decide, yeah, I'm gonna just go and take a big old swim over there, and I'll be back, maybe. Cause so yeah, so like there isn't much I can say. So let's go out of our way to spoilers. Anything else would be spoilers. If you want to just hear the very gimmick of this movie, go ahead and listen to spoilers because I will tell you immediately what the gimmick of this movie is. So I'm trying to avoid spoiling this movie, but probably a lot of people could easily figure it out. So without a doubt, let's go into spoilers of this film because I'm gonna immediately tell you what the gimmick is. So it is spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time you're going to spoil this movie. So spoilers now. So the gimmick of this movie is people are going to be living a lifespan of 50 years within one whole day. So it's basically like in the one movie Interstellar, where while like Matthew McConaughey and I think the one girl go onto the one planet and come back, and you have like the other astronaut that is aged like decades. Like it kind of feels like that part of Interstellar. It's not a space movie. It's not an outer space movie. But I'm just saying it feels like that kind of explanation. So, but let's get into here. So, like I said, we have this couple that is won this kind of like sweepstakes of a thing to go to this resort. They decide to, and so really we have this couple who's Guy and Priska, who are wanting to take their son and daughter, who is Trent and Maddox, to go to this place because this is probably going to be their last hurrah, because I think both Guy and Priska are eventually going to divorce one another, because we end up finding out kind of a number of things in this film. Priska is to supposedly have a tumor in her stomach, and that's kind of one way of just having Priska just be like, you know what, I think that like who knows how much time like she's going to have left in this world, and she probably might die. But also there's something else that I will hopefully probably bring up later when we get into this. So we send this family on, and so they go to this resort, and so immediately we have this waitress with like pre-selected drinks from all these people, and so it's like, yeah, drink up, because we find out that these drinks are to do something for these people. We'll eventually find out like there's one girl who would have like grand mal seizures, and we end up finding out that the drink that they had given her had kind of stopped her or prevented her from having grand mal seizures for a certain number of hours. And they're like, yeah, that's the one thing to take away from here, is like they're basically like drugging and experimenting on people, and then just like, hey, if they make it out, they make it out great. But hopefully they also don't make it out, because we want to just like see paint dry here. So anyways, so we have a certain like we have this whole resort thing, and like this kind of like reminds me of like Jurassic World a lot. Like there's a lot of stuff that just kind of reminds me of Jurassic World without the dinosaurs and without the like it's just like, ooh, this place is so cool, like la da 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 da. So we have this whole group who all decides to go down to this beach that is to like have this little cave ash like thing, or cave like rock climbing ash like thing that looks like a cave, but it's just a rock climbing ash like thing to get back towards the island. And so we all of a sudden start having this group who are to eventually just enjoy the sun and just have like the best time. And like all of a sudden we have one person who's going through this one part of this little like cave ash like thing to all of a sudden find a body. And so now we have Charles, who we find out is like this doctor who is just like, okay, well, like now we're gonna have to go like and like try to tell people that there's a body here. And so now we're gonna have to try to leave and tell people about this body. It's like, hey guys, like we're all responsible for like having this body being sent to the authorities and whatever. Like that's what we're gonna have to do. So all of a sudden we have these people who one way or another like try to leave or try to go to a certain part of this island, and all of a sudden they get like drowsy and they like fall asleep. Like there's some kind of problem where it's kind of like forcing them, like drugging them out or something, that like it's some kind of barrier thing that if they get to a certain point they basically get like, you're done, like you're gonna be passing out, or you're just not going to be able to go any further because you're just gonna get this like this force field kind of a thing with your own brain, body, or whatever, that's going to prevent you from going any further than a certain part. So all of a sudden they are to see this body. And so all of a sudden we have like Charles's mother, who is probably the oldest out of this group, who is to all of a sudden just keel over and die. And so Charles is now like, oh my god, my mother is to die. And so all of a sudden we eventually have them finding these like very like wooden knives like in a part of this place. And so like, why would they have all these wooden knives here? That seems like very odd. But the weird thing is we end up finding out if someone is to ever get like cut. Like there's one point where a guy is to get like cut in the face, the wound immediately heals. And so at one point we have Priska, who eventually like absolutely needs like surgery being done because of like the tumor that she is to have in her body, which is revealed. They have to eventually remove it because it is getting abnormally large, and so they have to remove this thing because like it wasn't a concern like when she first got here, but like now considering everything is growing a lot faster than it should. So like we have these kids who are to go from ages like I think the youngest age is to be like 6 to 11 to 15 to like basically almost 40 or 50 by like the tail end of this film. And basically all the adults are like, oh my god, we're going to age like 50 years in one day. And so like, oh my god, we are probably going to die. So it even gets to the point where we have Trent and we have Kara at one point, uh, or Kara, who are like eventually just like laying next to one another, and all of a sudden Kara is to all of a sudden, like, once she's to get much older, all of a sudden she's to be pregnant for no reason that makes sense. And so they have to bizarrely quickly deliver this baby because, like, this girl is already, like, 5 months pregnant and, like, she just slept with a guy. And but there wasn't any sleeping. It was just them cuddling next to one another. So I guess that meant pregnancy. And so all of a sudden, like, this girl delivers this baby and then the baby dies because, like, it wasn't taken care of quick enough. Like, the second after this baby was to be delivered, the baby immediately dies, sadly enough. So I'm like, what the heck is this film? Like, oh my god, this is crazy. So we have this guy who is just called mid-sized sedan. And so it seems like we have this guy who is kind of just losing his mind. He kind of gets a little knife happy through this movie. And so eventually, once people are to start to get cut or to start to get killed, like we eventually just see their bones just, like, you just see, like, they've heavily just decayed and died off and whatever. So, but anyways, because eventually Charles does quickly see his mother just bones and all, and he's like, oh my god. So but I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, so it is what it is. uh So yeah, so Priska eventually has to get emergency surgery done, and we have a guy named Jarvin who is also luckily a kind of doctor as well as Charles is. I think Charles is like a plastic surgery like doctor, but like doctors are doctors. So Charles is to consistently bring up this Jack Nicholson Marlon Brando movie, and he wants to try to figure out what the title of the movie is, and he just becomes like very like distracted, and so it gets to the point where Charles is to consistently ask about this like Jack Nicholson Marlon Brando movie, even to the point where it almost kind of becomes comical, sadly enough. But like to where he's just like, wait, everybody, like, stop whatever you're doing, like, who knows anything about movies? Like, because he just continues to bring up the Jack Nicholson, Marlon Brando thing over and over. Like, he just brings it up. Because I guess he's just eventually having a mental illness or Alzheimer's or whatever. Like, but he, like, I guess that just keeps popping up in his brain. And so, like, he's just, like, continuing to ask about it. But what ends up happening with Priska, let's get back to that. So Priska, like, gets her stomach cut open, but here's the thing, the wound is, like, healing as quickly as, like, they're cutting, so it's like Wolverine healing factor going on here. So Jarman says, okay, like, what we have to do is we have to cut this thing, hold the thing open, and like take this thing out as quickly as possible. So by the time that they take this thing out, this tumor is like a freaking like an apple or bigger sized, and they're like, oh my god, like this thing supposedly was like a golf ball, like, or golf ball or smaller in this woman, but now it's like the size of a freaking apple or a pear or something. So this surgery heals, and this girl is like, okay, I feel great. I'm back to normal. Uh, so, uh, Charles is to eventually have like this supermodel woman with him, and like you can just tell that this girl like is irrelevant. Like she like put on makeup, but eventually Charles is to tell her it's like, well, like like aren't you gonna put on some makeup? Like I guess because she just looks like she's really aged, but it's like it's unstoppable at this point. So we kind of have for the longest time like Jarvan is kind of the leader of this group, but what ends up happening is eventually uh, Jarvan's wife Patricia eventually dies from a grand mal seizure, and so eventually Jarvan goes out in the water and drowns himself, and that takes care of two people. Like they consistently keep seeing people like pop out of the water every once in a while. Uh, because the mid-sized sedan guy eventually goes and I think drowns himself also. Because we have Maddox who ends up going out in the water to just swim. Because she eventually finds out that her mother was having an affair with some other man, and like that's why both Priska and Guy were gonna call it off, and so Maddox went in the water to just kind of cope with this whole like information, and Priska is like, "Well, like we don't have time for you to like cope with all this because I'm gonna probably die soon." So, because the longer and longer that we like go about this, like of course we start to see these people rapidly aging. You start to see the crow's feet and all kinds of things, and so really you just start to see like these characters eventually just more and more just become into adults. Here's the thing that I think is goofy. How is it that you have like a consistent change of attire for these like kids who eventually turn into adults? Like how is it that a swim trunk thing like fits for Trent throughout every single age? And eventually I think Maddox eventually has her mother give her a new swimsuit that coincidentally uh, Priska is to have. Like, what if she wouldn't have packed an extra swimsuit? I guess luckily the story just conveniently worked out to just be like, yeah, I have an extra swimsuit because I just know that people are just going to be tearing off my swimsuit and just, like, it's convenient, but, like, I don't know. So, but anyways, like there was bits and pieces of stuff where I was just like, man, this is paint drying. But uh, eventually we get where eventually more and more like guys like Charles or the mid-sized sedan guy eventually start losing their stuff. They start to get very, very crazed, and so Charles is to eventually come at both Guy and Priska with like a wooden knife. And so eventually what ends up happening with Charles towards the end of here is that they end up stabbing Charles instead. They get the knife away from him because I guess he's much older than a lot of the other people are. And so Guy ends up stabbing Charles, and so Charles, all of a sudden, because of his stab wound, is eventually going to get infected. And this infection is going to work so quickly that this guy is going to just quickly die from this infection. And he's going to, like, die horribly. So, like, I think that covers, like, most of these people that eventually die. Both Guy and Priska eventually just die from old age, of course. But there is at one point where Kara is going to try and like climb these rocks to try to make it to the resort, and Kara gets pretty far, uh, especially with after just having like a pregnancy. She's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna make it up these rocks. Like I'm gonna get help," and so consistently they're having her stop, or they're having her like, hey, just like rest off to the side there for a bit, because like who knows when eventually she's going to get conked out or get that whole like mental thing where she falls asleep and like falls over. But it seems like Carol is making it really far, and everybody was rooting for her. They're like, hey, like, because Trent was eventually going to like follow her up there, but they were just like, well, we don't know if like she's gonna make it or not, or like what if she dies? And so Trent is just like, well, but she's my woman technically because we cuddled together for a minute. Uh, so, uh, so Kara is to eventually make it pretty far up, but then eventually she ends up falling all the way down. And so they're like, well, I guess that's a bust. So Kara sadly dies. So basically that leaves us with just Trent and Maddox because technically, I guess out of everyone, I guess they're either the youngest, but also the people that didn't make any kind of mistakes. So all of a sudden, like Trent and Maddox are eventually like just building a sandcastle, and like they're thinking about like maybe there is some kind of strategy here. Maybe we need some kind of metal cylinder or something to eventually just kind of cut through the whole mental block of us trying to get out of here. And like they kind of compare it to you wearing like a metal like vest when you're to do like dentist x-rays, where like the radiation won't like get on like parts of your body or whatever. So they make that kind of comparison. So what ends up happening is that Trent, it was to find some note that eventually he was to decipher or decode or whatever. And all of a sudden, the note is to say, my uncle does not like the coral. And so they're like, wait a minute. Like, maybe we can swim out both Maddox and Trent, who are now like almost like 50 some odd years old. Or however, what is their oldest age? Like they just call them adult. Great, thanks, that helps. So both adult Trent and adult Maddox decide that they can swim through this big thing of coral and hopefully be able to like that being their metal cylinder that they can kind of just make it through there and not and get through like the mental blocking barrier of a thing. And so they start swimming out there, and all of a sudden we have Midnight Shyamalan, who is the who's like kind of like the driver of this whole like hotel. Like he drives people to spot to spot to spot. And so all of a sudden he like has this like this kind of camera that's doing video and whatever on these people, kind of like assessing everything. And so we have him go and kind of like analyze what's going on. And so he sees both of them swimming out. And so he's like, well, more than likely, probably both of them drowned. Because we just see a sequence where Maddox and Trent are swimming out through the coral, and Maddox is to get stuck. And that's all we actually see. And so we have M. Night Shyamalan's character who just naturally assumes that they drowned. So he goes back and just like, well, like nobody made it, everyone died. So after that analysis, all of a sudden we have the hotel manager who is to come in to talk to these people and say like, well, hey, yeah, like all these people, they didn't make it out, but like this is like experiment 72 or something like that. And so it's like, holy crap, so they've done this numerous times over and over and over again, and it all has to be something with like people having like a mental disorder that they pick, or there has to be something wrong with them, like some kind of illness or some kind of something that they will pick them to like basically be a part of this resort. So the one saving grace is to have this one scientist mention. It's like, well, yeah, the Patricia girl who had grand mal seizures. It seems that we have given her uh, this drink concoction that was to prevent her from having grand mal seizures for 8 hours. So if anything, like that's the one true takeaway from all of these people dying off is just the 8 hour prevention of grand mal seizure. And so it's like, hey guys, high five for that. Like, and so all of a sudden we have like the hotel manager going and like seeing his son, and like we have like all these people just having a good time at this resort. And so all of a sudden we have both Trent and we have both Maddox who end up coming back and basically pulling the or blowing the whistle on this whole place. Trent and Maddox come back and tell everybody what's going on. They knock drinks out of this one waitress's hands and say, like, don't drink that. Like they're drugging you. Like, don't trust them. Get the heck out of here. Fly out of here if you can, but get freaking out of here. Because here's also the thing: when they were to go to this resort, there is no cell phone signal. Like we had Jaren who had a cell phone on him. And he's like, okay, that's weird. Like I can't get one lick of a cell phone signal. Like this is bananas. And so, but yeah, so Trent and Maddox eventually go and find one of the guys who came there as a police officer. And so all of a sudden, like they're finding out all kinds of information about all the people who had previously died. Like there's lists of people who came here that had all died before. And so, like, yeah, they're finding out all kinds of things about this place. People are getting the whistle being blown on this spot. And so, yeah, this place is going to just be like a deserted resort from here on out. I'm naturally assuming a lot of people are going to be put to jail because they're killing people, numerous people. And so, yeah, so, and a lot of people are not going to have realized that they dodged a bullet here for a lot of these people. So, like, that's where, like, we leave this movie is eventually these people being called out on it. We have the two people survive, and they helped everyone just, like, get the heck out of here. You're going to die. So, with that said, that's all that I wanted to say about this movie. I kind of, in a very, like, generic way, did this film. I know a lot of people might have wanted a ton more details about this film, and I didn't do it that way. Like, oh well. It's just, like, people might not be interested in this movie, or people might be very interested in this movie, but, like, if there's a slip of details or whatever that go on here, I do apologize, but otherwise, I say that every video. Like, it's just like, oh well. There's movie specialists that come on here and, like, so, like, I'm sorry, this is the way I review things. See you later. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.